21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
I've learned that pain can really help us formulate our perspective. Pain is really what can help us find our purpose. I remember for myself when I went down this journey, it was 2012. I was working a great job. I was staying in nice hotels, traveling across the country, doing presentations for a small subsidiary of Xerox, a transnational company. And in my early 20s, I thought life was great. I was staying in nice hotels, I was making good money, getting to meet great people. I had no idea that my life was going to get flipped upside down. And one night I was driving home in the countryside and two horses jumped out onto the road at the last second. It's 11 p.m. at night in the country, so houses are spread apart. And I'm driving down, and out of nowhere, two horses jump out into the bushes. And from the bushes. And I didn't know anything about horses. They were Clydesdales, so it means that the horses were actually bigger than the SUV I was driving. And even though I slammed on the brakes, nothing prepared me for them crashing into my car and instantly dying, the whole car collapsing onto me. And it was 3 inches was the distance between life and death for me. And as the days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months, in the early going, I thought everything was going to be fine. I survived the accident. I had a few bumps, a few scrapes, but I didn't realize that I started to have some much deeper issues, physical issues, mental issues, emotional issues. And as these started to unravel and take their toll on me, it really started to expose what a lot of my life had been built on. Yes, on the outside, I had so many great things, a lot of things to be grateful and happy for. But the truth is that the accident actually revealed that I was not prepared for change, that I was not prepared to handle pain, that I had not fully come to terms with the fact that my life was going to change drastically. And as the months went by, I had to leave my job. Pain, a disability, headaches, depression, all of these things started to cascade. And someone who was normally very ambitious and filled with potential now found himself lying on the floor hours at a time, days on end sometimes, wondering what his next move was going to be. Here I was, going from working since I was 13, 2 or 3 jobs, volunteering, helping the community, to being depressed and lying on my parents' basement floor, unsure of what my next move was. And that lasted almost a year. My name is Matthew Sanjari, and I'm a business coach and strategic business consultant. Simply put, I help businesses and entrepreneurs increase their profitability, productivity, and the predictability in their businesses. So often I will work with an entrepreneur or a decision maker or a business who's got a pretty solid plan, on paper at least. And that's how I used to feel also. I remember looking back at, there's not a lot of difference between the me of 12 years ago when I had my accident and now, at least not on the face value. I'm still filled with plenty of ambition. I'm still very energetic and I love people. But I would say the biggest difference that helped me chart out my next moves was that I realized really, really quickly that I had no idea how to respond when the plan falls apart. See, before the accident happened, I had had my life planned out: build a business, get some employees, get some revenue, invest in some real estate, buy a house, have a family. I had all these wonderful things planned out on my timeline. And when the accident happened, I lost control. I lost control of my professional career. I lost control physically. I lost control emotionally and mentally. All of a sudden, so many of the things that mattered to me, like volunteering, working, being with people, I wasn't doing these things anymore. They didn't bring me as much joy, it felt like. Felt like my plan and all of my ambition had fallen apart. And so as I started to go through a year of not working and being very upset and depressed and angry, wondering why my whole life had changed and if I could ever get it back, I ended up starting a marketing company. I didn't go to school for marketing. I had a fortuitous opportunity that a friend set me up with, and he invited me into his company and introduced me to his boss, the gentleman he was working for, and it was there that I left with my first marketing client. And I took this as my redemption story, my one shot. And so I used the money for my first client to teach myself marketing. And over the next 3 years, I would love to tell you that the story gets better. It doesn't. Yes, I had a business. Yes, I had an opportunity to make some money, but truth is I didn't know how to deal with change. I had a new opportunity, but I was still living the same way I had lived before, unsure how to adapt to evolving plans. I was great at sales. I could get into a room and, I always believed that if I got into the room, I would land the client. As long as I got to talk to somebody, I was relational enough that I could win them over. But I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know what execution and implementation looked like. And so now all these things that I hadn't considered in my plan were slapping me in the face. They were staring me down. And it took 4 years after the accident, 3 years into my business, my last business, for me to realize, okay, something has to change. And so when I realized that something had to change, I came to two realizations that really helped shape my business and ultimately transform my life. The first one is linked to a business adage or a leadership quote that I'm sure we've all heard. It's been said, you cannot manage what you're not measuring. And I realized really quickly, I had no idea what success actually looked like. I couldn't measure it. I thought success was as long as there's more money in the bank than there is coming out, then business is good. And it wasn't until I started to delve down and I actually started to ask myself, what does success look like for me? That I actually started to get a clear picture. And one of the things that I do now with many of my clients is I actually tell them, I say, take numbers off the table. You can't use a number. Don't tell me you want to make $1 million. Don't tell me you want $10 million in revenue. Without using a number, tell me, what does success look like for you? And for me, when I finally answered that question 3 years into my business, I realized that the whole reason I wanted to be an entrepreneur is I wanted freedom of time. I wanted freedom of choice. I wanted to be able to spend time with my friends, spend time with my family, go on trips, get so many of the things that my parents, as my father was a refugee, my mother an immigrant, didn't really get to do with us because they were too busy working. They had to. And so when I realized that that's what success looked like for me, it started to open up Pandora's box of questions. Well, if success looks like owning my time, why am I answering emails at 11 p.m. at night? Why am I allowing my clients to call me at 9:30 p.m.? Why am I leaving, um, you know, dinner reservation to go answer work things? I didn't have boundaries. And so by identifying and isolating the answer to this question, what does success look like for me? I can now measure what success looks like, and it changed the way that I built. And that led me to the second point. And the second point that I carry today as well for my clients. And it's the idea that is behind the 80-20 rule. The idea that 20% of our efforts dictate 80% of the results, which means that there's 80% of my effort, 80% of my time that isn't amounting to much. So I wanted to know, what am I wasting my time on? Not just time wise, but what am I wasting my energy on? What am I wasting my mental fortitude on? And so I started to list off all of the things that I was doing, every single task. I spent a few weeks just documenting how I was spending my time. And I realized really quickly that there were a lot of things I was doing that I didn't have to do. No one had ever taught me that as the business owner or as the decision maker, sure, it was my job to make sure everything gets done, but it was not my job to make sure that I did everything. I didn't have to do everything. And so that started me on a journey of helping identify what are the things in my life that maybe I could automate? What are the things in my life that maybe I could delegate to free up time? And maybe there are things in my life that are redundant that I could be eliminating. And that three-step framework helped me over and over again buy back my time, buy back my mental energy, and allowed me to keep growing and keep pushing, not just in business, but also in my life. Everybody I talk to wants to grow. Everybody wants to scale. Scale is a buzzword that we use in business, we use in life. Everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to scale. The question is not whether we want these things. I think that the question is how we get there. For me, one thing I often ask everybody I come across, I ask them the same question. I say, if you got knocked out of your business, heaven forbid, for 30 days, and you had no contact with anyone, what would you come back to? What kind of finances would you come back to? What kind of clients would you come back to? What kind of business would you come back to? And I ask that question because what it does is it elicits an emotional response in people. Oftentimes, and I have to tell them, hey, it's okay. It's just a question. But what it does is it raises up all these fears, and people have an awareness now of all the areas where, oh man, if something were to happen to me for 30 days, I don't think my finances, I'd come back and, bills wouldn't be paid and, invoices wouldn't be sent out. And I ask that because I'm a big believer that when we get clarity, that's the basis for which we get growth. And so when I ask that question, I already know very quickly what area we need to tackle first, because it's oftentimes the first thing that the person says they're terrified of. And if we can work through that fear, that's the first thing that I want to address the systems for, the structures, the strategy. I like to frame it that I don't need to be an expert. As a business coach and a consultant, I think a lot of people are looking for experts. And maybe there are business coaches or consultants that consider themselves experts. I don't need to be an expert. In fact, when I work with someone, they're the expert. They're in their field. They're the ones working with their clients, with their suppliers. They know their field. They're the expert. What I'm great at is bringing accountability and helping move people from A is deep. I help move people from where they are at to where they want to be. And so true growth, true scaling actually happens when we reach the common denominator that is our fears. What is that thing that if you left would fall apart? Let's start there. Because if your business or your job or your mission can continue on, even when you're not around, it's probably because it's built on a really good foundation. And so one of the things that I do is I often establish this, the very first thing I do. And from there, I take people into what I call are the 4 Ps. My company's called Prime, and so I stick with what I call the 4 Ps: purpose, predictability, productivity, and profitability. Now, when I say those four, I know which one everyone gravitates towards. Everybody wants to talk about profitability. I ask, I always ask to say, hey, which one do you want to tackle first? And everybody says profitability without fail. And I often have to say to people, that's actually the last thing we're going to tackle, because profitability isn't something you work on. It's an outcome. Profitability is the outcome of knowing your purpose, being incredibly productive and efficient, and having predictability in your systems and your structures. When we achieve those three, I've yet to meet a business that wasn't profitable. But oftentimes when we want growth and we want scaling, when we want to achieve maximum results, we put the cart before the horse and we chase profitability. Maybe it's in your health, maybe it's in your fitness, and you chase the number on the scale without realizing that that's just the byproduct of great habits, great nutrition, being consistent. Business and life is the same. And so it's getting ourselves aligned to what's the basis that we're going to work from, what's that clarity we need, which is why I asked the question, and then starting to work people through the framework that is purpose, productivity, and predictability. So the beauty of what I get to do as a business coach and consultant is that I get to take people places that I've been, right? I love that I get to tell people, this is not just theory. I have lived this. You know, when I ask the question, what does success look like for you if numbers are not allowed to be used? I remember one of the first times I had to ask myself that question. You know, now I use an exercise called the 5 whys. But for me, going through this was a very painful exercise, you know, because I had to sit there and say, okay, what does success look like for me? Well, I can't use a number, so I'm going to say, I want to make a lot of money. Why? Well, because I want to have freedom of my time. I want to be able to make choices that are not dependent on money. Why? Because if I make enough, then I don't have to work for anyone else and I can be independent. Why? And usually by the third time, it gets emotional. Now we're hitting the heart. And so for that third time I asked why, I went, because I didn't have that as a kid. My parents would have loved to give me that, but they didn't have the opportunity. Why? And my last why was because I was scared that I would not live up to my potential. And I would repeat the cycle. When my parents came to North America, it's because they wanted us to have a better life, not the same one. And I realized that so many of my decisions were based out of fear. And so many of my clients, when I talk to them, they are living out of fear. They started a business because they were afraid to work for somebody else, or they were afraid they were going to end up poor like their families. And so when I identified that that was my why, it changed the way that I viewed the world, changed the way that I was viewing my life, because now no longer would I have to be bound or guided by these decisions in secret. I can now live from this place. I know my why. My why is not $1 million. I tell people all the time, look, you can make $1 million and then you can get there and be unhappy, unhealthy, and feel very unfulfilled. Or you can get to your goal, which is not your why. You can get to your goal by honoring your why and still get there. It may take a little bit longer. It may look a little different. You may have to tear up your plan a few times. But when you get there, it's going to be scalable. It's going to be something that is sustainable. And that's what I'm trying to help people achieve. And, it's something that, to take it back to something I said earlier, it really reminds me of, the accident was 12 years ago, 2012, 2024. And I would love to sit here and tell you that there's a happy ending to this story, that I'm pain-free, that we figured it all out. No, I still live with pain. There are still days where my headaches are bad, where I have physical pain, where the chronic pain is bad, where sometimes my motivation is not good. I don't want to get up and go to the gym, or I don't want to go to work. That's 12 years later. I had pain then, and I have pain now. The only difference in that situation is that I chose to change my perspective. 12 years ago, I thought my life was over because of my pain. And now, 12 years later, my pain has not only helped my life, given me a career and a job, but it's helping so many of my clients. It's helping them through the pain that I went through the questions I've had to learn through my journey. And so I get to take people on a growth journey that isn't based in theories, that isn't just academic textbooks. It's things that I know are real because I've lived them. And I still live them. And I get to help them live them out now. And I love seeing people find their why, build and honor their businesses and their lives to follow that why, and then build businesses that are sustainable, predictable, and grow while staying true to themselves, because that's what I've had to do for the last 12 years.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.